Darkness Falls is a horror movie about the Tooth Fairy. There, now you know, and you don't have to groan when you hear about it later. I saw this in theaters back in 2003, and I remember saying out loud, it was the Tooth Fairy? Back then, my 16-year-old self was pretty disappointed. However, after rewatching Darkness Falls all these years later, I have to admit, it was actually better than I remembered. So maybe it's about time that you have a second viewing too. First, a little backstory. 150 years ago, in the town of Darkness Falls, lived a nice old woman named Matilda Dixon. All the kids loved her, and she loved all the kids. When they would lose their last baby tooth, she would exchange it for a gold coin. What? Wait a minute. A gold coin? That lady must have been loaded. How many kids are coming to her with teeth? What'd she do with them all? Surely there would have been some kids that would beat up others for their teeth. This whole system is just a bad idea. Anyway, moving forward, one night her house caught on fire and she was left horribly scarred with a sensitivity to light, forcing her to only go out at night with a porcelain mask on so no one would see her face. Soon, this nice old lady who traded gold for teeth is now a creepy old hag who wanders around alone at night. When two kids mysteriously go missing, Matilda was the first to be blamed, and they sent her to the gallows. It turns out that the kids came back the next day. Oopsie. But the damage was done. Before she died, Matilda put a curse on the town.
What I took before in kindness, I will take forever in revenge.
Now we meet Kyle, who just lost his last baby tooth. Now, I have to admit something here. Teeth bother me. You know they're the only part of your skeleton you clean, right? It's just so weird that we have two sets of them as kids, and then after that you lose one and it's gone forever. I have a fake tooth, and it's kind of weird. The day they worked on it and put a crown in, it was like part of me was missing, like I cut my finger off or something. I don't know. The point is, teeth are creepy. Anyway, Kyle gets a visitor that night. His crush, Caitlin. They talk a little bit, and he asks her to the school dance, and yada yada yada. When she leaves, she puts his tooth under his pillow and warns him.
Remember, when the Tooth Fairy comes, don't peek.
Well, of course, in the middle of the night, he wakes up in a cold sweat with something in his room. It moves in the shadows as he hides under the covers. He finally works up the courage to take a look, and boom! Freaky Tooth Fairy! He screams, which wakes up his mom, who comes to investigate. Kyle watches her as she goes into his room, and at first, all is fine, until she sees Matilda in the mirror, and she's a goner. Kyle hides in the bathroom all night with the lights on, which keeps him safe from the monster waiting right outside the door. The next day, Kyle's mom is taken away and he's sent into the foster system. 12 years later, we pick back up with Caitlin, who's at the hospital because of her brother. It turns out that he can't sleep more than 10 minutes at a time because he gets night terrors. Physically, the doctors can't see anything wrong with the boy, but Caitlin knows he's acting just like her old friend Kyle, so she calls him for some help. When we check in on him, we can see that his experience 12 years ago really affected him, understandably so. Now he lives in Vegas, the city that never sleeps. He has a ton of flashlights in his apartment and even generators in case the power goes out. This guy hasn't had a good night's sleep in over a decade. When he hears that Michael, Caitlin's brother, is experiencing the same thing he is, he decides to fly back to his hometown and see what he can do. He talks to Michael, and it's not long before we can tell that these guys are being tormented by the same entity. But, I mean, Mike is just a little kid. What's Kyle gonna say? Oh yeah, there's this old witch that wants your tooth, but because you sneaked a peek at her, now she's gonna kill you. Just stay in the light and you'll be fine. No, he tells him that his sister won't let anything bad happen to him. And, right on cue, Caitlin comes in. The two catch up for a little bit, with her coming right out and saying it.
When your mother died, what really happened to you?
Thinking that this whole trip was a mistake, he gets up to leave, but is stopped at the door by Larry, who seems to be dating Caitlin. He offers to take Kyle out for a drink and welcome him back to town. He goes with Larry, but you can tell he is not comfortable in a bar. The low lighting is the perfect place for Matilda to hide in the shadows. Eventually, Kyle is recognized as the kid who killed his mom, and a fight breaks out, with it ending in the dark woods. Kyle hasn't thrown a punch this whole time, but now, seeing the evil Tooth Fairy in the shadows, he's forced to, just to get them both out of there. Well, it doesn't work. Kyle escapes, but the bully doesn't, and he becomes Matilda's next victim. Instead of going back to Vegas like he probably should at this point, Kyle goes to the hospital and Kate bandages him up. Even though, I mean, there's gotta be more qualified people working there to do the job. I guess American healthcare is pretty expensive, so I get it. While they talk, Kyle tells Caitlin to stop all the tests on her brother. He's been through it all, and he knows that it won't help him. So at least spare the kid that. Just then, the police come in, and guess who's the prime suspect of killing that guy at the bar? Yep, Kyle. And what's he gonna say? The Tooth Fairy did it? They lock him up, but luckily Larry comes to get him out. It turns out that he's a lawyer, so a pretty good guy to know. You definitely wouldn't want him to die on you. Oh, great. As if crashing into a tree isn't bad enough, it's dark, and Matilda finishes the job. Kyle books it to the hospital, where they're just about to put Michael in a sensory deprivation tank, which is obviously just an MRI unit. Their thought on this is that he needs to face his fear and see that there's nothing in the dark, but there is something in there waiting for him. Luckily, Kyle gets there just in the nick of time, and he has him stop it, which Caitlin agrees to. But then, Kyle gets locked up again. It seems like everyone around him is getting killed, and the police need to get to the bottom of it. Good thing there's an emergency light that shines right on him in his cell. It would be a shame if the power was to go out and the cops would be attacked. All Kyle can do is try to warn them, but obviously they don't listen, instead falling for her trap of making them shoot out the lights. Eventually, Kyle gets his hands on some keys and he's able to make his escape. But some good news is now they know he's not crazy and they can work together to try to take this thing down. Kyle heads to the hospital to help Kate and Michael. He gets there just in time too because they're being chased by Matilda. They get a few seconds to catch their breath in here, but then the elevator stops mid-floor. They all manage to escape, with Kyle almost getting cut in half as it falls just as he gets out. Another fear of mine.
Give me your hand, I'll help you down.
Nope. Scared of getting cut in half.
They work with some of the hospital staff to try to escape, and one nurse makes a good point. They need to evacuate the entire hospital. But Kyle clarifies she only wants those who see her, so everyone else is safe. They need to work their way out of the hospital, staying in the light, which apparently is a pretty hard thing to do because everyone but Kyle, Caitlin, and Michael die. A random doctor makes it too, but he's just there to die later on, so he doesn't count. It's looking pretty bad for our heroes too, with Matilda coming closer and closer. But then, out of nowhere, a car comes crashing in through the front door, its headlights scaring away the demon. It's the only surviving cop who's working with Kyle to come up with a plan, which boils down to go to the lighthouse. She won't like that. They make it there and immediately start working on getting the backup generator working. They almost got it, but there's a leak in the fuel line, so they split up to fix it. The cop is taken out and he drops the lantern, exposing open flames in a lighthouse soaked in gasoline. That's not good for anybody. Eventually, Kyle gets the line fixed and he's just about ready to flip the switch, but he can't reach it. The only one who can is Michael. He turns on the light just in time and it hits Matilda, making her fly away. It's all over, right? She pulls Kyle up, and he fights her mid-air, knocking her mask off, and it shatters as it hits the ground, with a bunch of little teeth coming out of it. Now we see her true face, and I can see why she wore the mask. As the light touches her, she screams in pain. So Kyle takes advantage of this, and using his gasoline-soaked shirt, lights it on fire and punches her in the face. A normal punch isn't good enough. She needs a freaking Hadouken. Hadouken! At this, she drops him and explodes, finally ending the sadistic reign of the Tooth Fairy. And that was Darkness Falls. What'd you think? Do you agree with me? Not as bad as you thought a horror movie starring the Tooth Fairy would be. The music was pretty good, the acting was fine, and the plot was a fun take on something you would never think would be scary. They do a good job with the lighting and the use of shadows, and there are some pretty funny one-liners in there too.
We're gonna have to jump it.
Jump it? Are you crazy?
Yeah, a little bit.
But do you want to know the real tragedy? This was the original design of the creature in Darkness Falls. Why they didn't use that monstrosity instead, I'll never know. The burnt face and porcelain mask was creepy, but nothing compared to this thing. It turns out that the studio didn't like the original design, so they cut it out and had Stan Winston come in to see what he could do with the final product. Now, who am I to judge Stan Winston's work, doing the effects for Terminator, Jurassic Park, Aliens, and so on? I mean, the guy's a master. But in this case, I'm sorry. They should have kept the original design by Steve Wang. Anyway, lame studio decisions aside, Darkness Falls is worth a rewatch. It's short, only about an hour and 15 minutes long, so it's not going to waste much of your time. I give it 3 freaky tooth fairies out of 4.
Come on, I bought you a beer. Figured you'd like this one. It's a light.